everyone, it's Julia. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I have for you the projects that I made out of my last thrift store haul. I will link that video up above in the iCards and also down below. In that video I share a little bit more details on the items I picked up and also the price that I paid for each of the items, so check that out. But I'm excited. I actually got 2 separate projects made out of those 4 items. They turned out whimsical and cute, and I'm going to be showing you a little bit of the process along the way. So I hope you join me. Thanks so much. I am working with a valance, a belt, a skirt with motifs, and these little metal embellishments with letters on them. My first project is this pillow. The pillow measures 12 inches by 18 inches, and that's the finished measurement on the pillow. I had a lot of fabric to work with. It measures 65 by 14 inches. And I first started with just some deconstruction, and I pressed out the hems after I was able to take them apart, and I wanted to add this green piece to the bottom of the front of this pillow, and so I am taking away a little 3 inches off the bottom of it, and just sew this green fabric, and this is just from my stash. Cutting 3 of those little flower motifs out of the skirt. I found this again in my stash, this fabric that has tape measures on it. And I'm using 3 different colors of the tape measure. Now this fabric already had heat and bond on the back from a previous project, so I didn't have to do that step at all. The heat and bond was already in place. I'm just cutting out and figuring out what I'm needing here. I laid those little metal discs on top with the spelling out the word fly. And adding the bird to make the fly make sense a little bit. I'm adding this bird, and I'm just drawing this out freehand, just a shape of a whimsical bird. This is on a piece of tracing paper so I can see through, and now darkening my lines on the back side. When I use heat and bond, I want to always trace from the back side of the design so that it's going in the right direction. I'm just tracing on my heat and bond light. This little beak I am putting on the back of this little piece of orange fabric, and then chose this turquoise fabric for the rest of the bird. Now it's just going on and laying everything out the way I want it, and then taking that heat and bond off the back and again positioning everything before I iron. I will be taking this to my sewing machine next and will be free motioning this into place. This is a piece of quilt batting that I lay on the underneath part of this, and I'll take the whole thing to my sewing machine. So that batting is underneath. The very first thing I do here is I mess up. I caught some of that ruffly fabric on these motifs, so I had to seam rip that out a little bit. To go kind of slow when you have a dimensional item like this, when you're free motion, it's easy to get it caught underneath the presser foot. Now I have my feed dogs dropped and I have this free motion foot on. So I'm doing the driving and I'm just going around the pieces a couple different times just to get them secured. Doing the little bird now. When I get to the bird's feet or legs, I am going back and forth several times because I do want that to stand out a little bit. I have cream colored thread on here. And then I add this little curly fiber to the head, just for something fun. Changing my thread to black and drawing on the eyeball. Now back to my cutting table where I'm just squaring up and getting rid of anything that's hanging over the edge. These little discs I sew on by hand. And you can see what they look like, spelling out the word fly. Now on to my just finishing up my pillow, and I do this the same with all my pillows, and I'll link a video on how I do that. But I take a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then trim my corners and turn. I use a pokey tool to get all my corners turned out right. And then on and just get my seams all nice and flat. Turn under that little opening. I will be stuffing this with my favorite polyester stuffing that I get from Walmart. It is by Morning Glory and it's called Cluster Stuff. It's very light and airy. It doesn't clump at all. And this is what the finished pillow looks like. Now on to making my final project, and I had enough to make a tote bag. Doing a little bit of deconstruction on this as well. I am putting only one of the flower motifs on the front of my tote bag and adding a little bit of that same green fabric for the stem and the leaf of the flower, putting heat and bond on the back of it. I found this piece of orange fabric in my stash and I've decided to line the inside of this tote. So cutting that to the size that I need. I'm getting rid of that header just enough so that when I sew this flower on, it doesn't catch that header. I will be free motioning this flower on the same as I did with the pillow. I do not show it, but I do it the same way. Just cutting my pieces to what I need and positioning them in the right spot and taking that heat and bond off. And again, ironing into place. The flower is on now, and it's time just to sew up my bag. I will be sewing the side seam and across the bottom on both the outer and the lining, taking a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I did box the corners, the bottom of my, and I just did a triangle stitch, and then we'll be trimming this. And I trimmed both the lining and the outer bag. Opening up my seam allowance and pressing them flat on both my lining and outer bag. And then just slipping the outer bag inside the lining. This header on this valance worked out so nice. I didn't have to do any repressing. It made a real nice top to my tote bag. Just evening everything up and pinning, and then I will be just top stitching right on the original seam of this valance header. I stopped and started right before and after the flower because I didn't want to stitch through the flower. But now everything's stitched on and I'm turning it right side out. And now I'm sure you've guessed that the belt is going to be the strap of my tote and will be just hooked to the sides of this tote. But first I want to do some embellishment on this belt to give it a little bit of detail. One little scrap left of this valance, and I put heat and bond on the back of it. I'm cutting out the circles. These will be free motioned on. I also added lace and a little yo-yo. And just ironing those into place before I sew them on. My strap is attached, everything is sewn. And now I want to add one more, oh, I added Velcro. That's my closure, a 3-inch strip of Velcro to the top. And we'll be placing these little pieces of the green fabric over the top of that. And I just stitched this on, and I hemmed all those sides on that. But I want to add my initial to this one. Now I'm selling this in my Etsy store, so I can switch out whatever initial you want. But I decided to make a little fabric tag out of some of this fabric. This fabric was fun. It has like a little slub in it. Putting a little batting in between the tag. And I'll be running this through my Sizzix Big Shot with a scalloped tag from Sizzix. Everything will be listed down below. And edge stitching this little tag. And this is what it ended up looking like. It's just a fun little detail to the side. Added some trim to it, some ribbon. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Thanks again, and until next time, happy stitching.